Story time on how I got pregnant at 12 years old, and the guy who I was talking to at the time was 18, but he told me he was 15. Anyways, my child's father, which we're going to call Kareem, I met at a summer party, which, by the way, I wasn't supposed to go to, but I sneaked out with my friends. Me and Kareem met at the party. He asked for my number, but I gave him my Instagram instead because at the time I didn't even have a phone. I had an iPad mini that I would use at home. So I text him on there just about every night. He always talked about how I was the only girl he wanted, and my naive 12-year-old self believed everything he was telling me. Maybe 2 weeks later, he asked me if I was a virgin, and I didn't want him to think I was weird, so I said no, even though I was. And this is when everything starts to go wrong. Come back for part 2. This is part 2 on how I got pregnant at 12 years old, and the guy I was talking to at the time was 18. So, like I said earlier, he asked me if I was a virgin, and I said no, even though I was, because I didn't want to look like a weirdo. Kareem starts talking about how we should go on a little movie date, and that he'd buy me popcorn and whatever I wanted from the movie theater. So Friday night comes around, I sneak out of the house, and I met with Kareem down the street. He pulls me close and said that he wanted to blindfold me because he had a little surprise. I was nervous, but I trusted him, so I allowed him to blindfold me, by the way, which was the biggest mistake ever. So he grabs my hand and holds my bag, and all of a sudden, I hear people, and I get picked up, and I feel multiple people feeling on me. This is when the night takes a turn. I'm running out of time. Please come back for part 3. This is part 3 on how I got pregnant at 12 years old, and the guy who I was talking to at the time was 18. So Kareem blindfolds me for a surprise, and I get picked up. And it felt like there were multiple people picking me up. I screamed and told him to get off of me, and I tried to take my blindfold off, but Kareem yells out, "No, not yet." And I started to get a little confused and scared, and this went on for like a good minute, and I was just struggling to basically get away. Then I hear doors open and I'm screaming, and Kareem tells me to calm down. When I finally get put down, I end up smacking someone in the face just so they could let go of me. When I snatched my blindfold off to see where I was in someone's room. This is when it gets really manipulative. I'll be back soon as possible for part 4. This is part 4 on how I got pregnant at 12 years old, and the guy I was talking to at the time was 18. So I take off my blindfold and I'm in someone's room. I turn around and it's Kareem. I asked him what's going on and why am I there. Kareem looks at me and tells me that he brought me there for a surprise. When I look around, there's candles lit in the room, and I asked him, I thought we were going to the movies, and he tells me the movies was closed down. By the way, which it was not. Now thinking he was probably too broke to even take me to the movies. Anyways, Kareem tells me that I was being extra when I got picked up. He said he got his little brothers to transport me to his room. Thinking now it was stupid, but at the time I thought it was cute. Kareem says that he decorated the whole room to look like a movie theater, and that was a lie because his room looked like he scooped all his trash underneath his bed, and he lit up 2 candles. So much for the movies. But now that we're in his room, things get a little hot. Y'all let me know if I should make a part 5.
Story time about how I found out my husband was receiving naked pictures from a famous influencer. My husband started getting noticed on YouTube a few years ago. Ever since then, he thinks he's a stupid influencer. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. This is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. And let me just say, my husband is so stupid. He is literally like the dumbest person I've ever met. We dated for 2 months before he asked me to marry him, and unfortunately, I said yes. A few months after we got married, his YouTube channel started taking off, and he started acting like he was a stupid celebrity. He hired a publicist. He got himself invited to stupid influencer events. He even tried to get a Hollywood agent. God, he's so stupid. Around this time, he started meeting a lot of influencers, both guys and girls. He was also growing on Instagram. He was always on Instagram. He's so dumb that he wrote all of his passwords in a piece of paper, and it was in my nightstand. So of course, I logged into his Instagram. As soon as I open his DMs, I see naked pictures from a very famous influencer. He was sending her pictures too. Part 2 is up. I open his DMs and I see a famous influencer send him naked pictures. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. So I started scrolling through the whole conversation with this famous influencer. She had sent him like 15 or more naked pictures. And like I said in part 2, he was sending her pictures too. But his were the ones that disappear after you open them. So maybe he's not so stupid. I took screenshots and saved them on my phone. Then I scrolled through the rest of his DMs. And holy moly, there were other influencers who were sending him pictures. Not all of them were naked pictures. Mind you, all of these influencers knew he was married. I was extremely furious, but I knew I had to keep my head cool. By the way, have you guessed who he is? So here's what I did. I took a stupid little play button from YouTube and I threw it in a dumpster. Then I turned on the fireplace and put all of his clothes. And I took his passport and ripped all the pages out. You won't believe what happens next. Part 3 is up. After I burned all of my YouTuber husband's clothes, I took all the naked pictures that the influencer sent him, and I sent them to her management. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. I wrote to her management and explained what happened. I told them that if they didn't stop working with her, I would send the pictures to TMZ. And just like I expected, within minutes I got a reply. They begged me to delete the pictures, and they offered me $20,000 to keep my mouth shut. Of course I said no. And that's when my husband comes home. He sees all of his clothes that I burnt. God, the look on his face was so stupid. I showed him all of my receipts. Then he confessed that he only did the dirty with her once. I literally thought they had just sent pictures to each other. And his phone rings. Guess who it is? It's the damn influencer. She goes off on him and tells him that I'm threatening her career and that how could he be so stupid to not delete the pictures. They haven't spoken since. I still don't know what to do. Did I send the pictures to TMZ? I already filed for divorce too. I want all his money. Storytime about how I escaped my abusive husband. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it was sent to me on Instagram. My soon-to-be ex-husband is the most toxic person I've ever met in my entire life. We've been married for almost 3 years. We got married after 4 months of being boyfriend and girlfriend. And to be honest, no, we really didn't know each other. At the beginning, he was totally kind, generous, and really fun. We were always going to parties and we had so many friends. Here's where things started getting scary. He never posted me on his Instagram. In fact, he rarely ever posted on his Instagram at all. I'm very active on social media. I'm constantly posting pictures of us together. The fact that he never posted me on his social media made me think that maybe he was trying to look for other girls. But then I found out the truth. One day I get a DM from this girl, and she told me how my boyfriend had abused her in the past. She even had to get a restraining order. She basically told me she wanted to warn me about him. I didn't respond to her message because I wanted to ask him first. I showed him the messages later on that day, and he went nuts. He punched the wall, and he slapped me straight across the face. Part 2 is up. He slapped me straight across the face and I fell to the ground. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. When he saw what he'd done, he started apologizing right away. Then he said that the girl who contacted me on Instagram to warn me about him was just his stalker, and that he had broken up with this girl but she couldn't get over him. At the time, we weren't living together, so I went back to my mom's place. I didn't speak to him for a few days. Then he started coming over to my mom's house every single day with flowers, apologizing and begging me back. Unfortunately, I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I posted a picture of my engagement ring on Instagram, and that's when I got another message from another girl. She told me that my boyfriend was abusive and that she also had to get a restraining order. I didn't know who to believe. I went to my mother-in-law's house and I asked her what had happened. And she basically told me that he has issues with his temper. I asked her if what the girl said was true, and she said it wasn't her business to say. A few weeks later, we got married. And that's when the real torture started. He became super controlling and mean. And when I wouldn't do something he wanted, he would lock me in my room for hours. Part 3. My husband would lock me in the bedroom for hours. But then it got worse. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. It got to the point that whenever he would get mad, he would either push me, shake me, or slap me. This went on for a year, but I always hoped that he would just change. After 2 years, I decided to get in contact with the women who said they got restraining orders against my husband. Met up with both of them at a cafe to lie to my husband and say that I was going to be late at work. They brought all their receipts. They had pictures and text messages, emails, and police reports. Couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but at the same time I couldn't, you know? If I had just paid attention to these girls before we got married, none of this would have happened. But these girls knew exactly what I was going through. So we hatched a plan of how I would escape my abusive husband. At this point, he controlled everything, my cell phone and my bank account. By the way, I hadn't told my mom anything at this point. When I asked her for money and I told her why, she was shocked. The plan would be that I was going to escape at night. I waited for Friday because I knew he'd go out with his friends to drink. I called an Uber, but a few minutes later, my husband shows up at our door. Part 4 is up. The night I was planning to escape my abusive husband, I called an Uber to the house, but my husband showed up 2 minutes later. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it was sent to me on Instagram. As soon as he walks in through the door, he was totally drunk. That's when he told me that he was hungry. I pretended that everything was normal and that I didn't have an Uber coming to save me. I went to the kitchen, I made him a sandwich as quickly as I could. I came back out, took one bite, and started falling asleep. Thank God. I hid in my backpack behind a curtain, slowly grabbed the backpack and my shoes, and that's when my cell phone notified me that the Uber was there. I was terrorized at this point because I was hoping the noise from the cell phone didn't wake him up. I turned around, but he was totally passed out. I ran barefoot to the Uber, got in, and told him to drive away. I went straight to a friend's house and turned off my phone. Next day, I went straight to a lawyer to file for divorce. I had text messages and pictures. I also went to the police and they said that I can't file a restraining order yet. My husband, of course, is already looking for me. He went to my mom's house, but she didn't let him in. But here's the problem, I already miss him. He sent me an email apologizing, swearing that it won't happen again. My gut's telling me not to go back. What do you guys think? Story time about how I came out as gay to my husband. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. I'm 27 years old, and when I was in high school, I knew that I like girls. In fact, I pretty much only dated girls throughout all of my high school. I did also date guys. My parents were totally accepting of this, by the way. Growing up, I always knew that I wanted to marry a man so that I could have kids. When I got into college, I started dating this girl. Her and I dated for a couple of weeks, and she introduced me to my now husband. So he and I started hooking up behind her back, and she eventually found out and she broke up with me. Fast forward a few years later, and we're married. But here's the problem. I found myself only being attracted to women, and I was definitely not attracted to my husband. Obviously, this became a huge problem in the relationship. So guess what my husband did? He hired an escort to come spend some time with us, if you know what I mean. This was great, but I basically only wanted to be with the escort, not my husband. A few weeks later, the escort and I actually started dating. It's so bad, I know. My husband had no idea. And this escort actually asked me to be her girlfriend. Part 2 is up. So the escort and I started dating behind my husband's back. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. Like, her and I were in a full-blown relationship. Mind you, I'm a woman. Mind you, my husband doesn't know that I like women only. This went on for a few months. I was living a total lie. My husband would go to work. Since I work from home, I would go to my escort girlfriend's apartment and spend the day with her. I even took a toothbrush and some clothes. One day, my girlfriend and I decided to go watch a movie. We're standing in line to buy popcorn, and of course, we're kissing and holding hands. This is when one of my husband's employees comes up to me, taps my shoulder, and says hi. But she acted like she didn't see anything. Like she was just coming up to me and saying hi. I could tell that something was off. I mean, she saw me kissing this girl. That's when the guilt started getting to me. I could no longer lie to my husband. I knew I had to come out to him. That same night, I talked to my husband. I confessed everything and told him that I really liked women only. That's when he tells me that he knew about the relationship this whole time. That he knew I only liked women. Part 3 is up. My husband tells me that he knew I was having an affair this whole time. That he also knew that I only liked women. Claiming this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. That's when my husband tells me that it's okay. Because he can deal with me having this affair. Because he didn't want anyone to know that he was married to someone that liked women. He told me he'd rather stay married, have kids with me, and basically live a lie. I also forgot to mention my husband's a really wealthy guy. He offered me a lot of money to stay with him and have kids. Last week, I got a letter from his lawyer. It was a contract basically saying that if I stay with him and have his kids, he'll pay me a very large amount of money. But here's the thing. I've fallen in love with my escort girlfriend. She thinks I'm going to divorce my husband to be with her. But my husband thinks that I'm going to sign this contract and have his kids. Even my mother-in-law is getting involved. She's begging me to sign the contract and have the kids. Never thought I'd have to choose between love and money. A few days ago, my escort girlfriend actually asked me to move in with her. I told my husband, he said no. What should I do?